All right. Today I'm going to watch a 1982 Polish movie called Interrogation, or Przesłuchanie. This is a film by Polish director Ryszard Bugajski. The movie has been called the most anti-communist film ever produced by the Polish Republic. It was made during the communist regime in Poland and remained unreleased until after the revolutions of 1989. Yeah, it sounds kind of heavy. I like watching heavy second runish movies on this channel sometimes. The movie is about a performer, a young woman who is jailed and is brutally and systematically interrogated by the Stalinist regime. It sounds harrowing as hell. I was really curious to watch this movie and finally got my hands on it. So yeah, let's watch The Interrogation. And before we get started, don't forget to click the like button and subscribe for more old, obscure, and art house films. Ooh, Agnieszka Holland is in this. That's interesting. So this character is apparently a member of the military service that does like recruiting and does entertainment. It's an interesting presentation of this character. I mean, obviously because she's a performer, but that her identity is kind of based expressly on her gender, and her kind of value to this unit is through the presentation of her gender and her sexual appeal to Polish citizenry. You know, performer sense of what is outrageous and what's not. Perhaps her perspective will change. Oh god. What kind of performance are they putting on? Yeah, a lot of her kind of like identity and her self-worth is placed in her gendered performance. Oh no. I'm like afraid that they're entrapping her right now, that they're purposely getting her drunk so that they could detain her afterwards. Oh yes, they're quickly going to detain her. Immediately placed into a holding cell. Oh man, this is reminding me of the third part of the night all over again. And a kind of similar filmmaking, or like a cinematographic style to Kowalski, of these kind of extreme close-ups. Jesus. What are they doing? These like windowless rooms, these windowless cells where you can't tell what time it is.
Stan 31, obecność 31. Ja bardzo przepraszam.
And by extrapolation, you can be made to understand that perhaps within this regime that how many number of women, how many number of people are wrongfully imprisoned, and extrapolate that further, that perhaps outside of that regime, how many people in general are wrongfully imprisoned, and how does the prison industrial complex stand to gain from wrongful convictions and wrongful imprisonment.
Wypuszczają. Dziwisz Antonina.
Dziwić.
Nie wiesz, że nazwiska nie wolno mówić na głos?
Przepraszam.
Melduję doprowadzenie Dziwisz Antoniny.
Bardzo się cieszę, że pan zechciał się
Tam jest stołek.
Part of this process of dehumanization, of disorientation, is by having all these kind of codes or rules.
Prowadził mnie do jakiegoś oficera, w każdym razie do kogoś.
Nazwisko i imię.
I'm gonna pause for a second. So, I kind of had like this disorienting effect to a certain degree when I like went to another country. You know, this is people telling your telling you their traveling abroad story. But you have this kind of chilling effect where if you travel to somewhere where you don't speak the language and you don't understand the culture, it's really hard to orient yourself and to communicate and to have your needs met. And part of the process, the intentional design of these oppressive systems and regimes is to create their own kind of frameworks and structures of symbols and lingo and bureaucracy to make like the language that you're speaking, your native language, foreign or unfamiliar to you. And if you're not able to speak the proper language, you're not able to properly advocate for yourself. So all of this is meant to kind of unmoor the detainees and make them unable to like robustly protect themselves.
Na pewno mnie z kimś pomyliliście i po prostu... Chyba nie chce pan, żebym panu opowiadała, jak się całowałam z chłopakami w 4. klasie.
Dlaczego nie? Proszę bardzo, mówcie.
Ale o czym?
And she's not allowed to know what she's meant to talk about, and to a certain degree her interrogator doesn't care what she's talking about because these are like made up charges.
Interesuje to pana?
It's made to do something as absurd as discussing the first boy that she kissed in school.
Czy on was?
Czego jest to wszystko panu potrzebne? Co to w ogóle ma wspólnego z moim aresztowaniem?
Żadne twoje, żadne intymne!
Jazda. Nazwiska wszystkich
disgusting.
mężczyzn, z którymi spałaś.
Nie pamiętam nazwisk.
And like the kind of femininity, the gender expression that was used to kind of bolster the home stain, the military is now being used against her.
Kiedyś weszłam na strych, tam on hodował gołębie, wyciągał... Tam to już był mój mąż. Konstanty Dziwisz.
Zdradzałaś go?
Nie. Zresztą co to pana obchodzi?
Are they looking for like somebody that she slept with that perhaps has a history,
Dalemańskiego znasz?
like a rebel, a political dissident?
Spałaś z nim?
Nie.
On twierdzi coś przeciwnego. Ja tu mam zeznanie kaprala Sokołówko, który twierdzi, że zastał się z majorem w sytuacji niedwuznacznej 15 lipca 1950 roku.
To tylko raz.
Jeżeli jeszcze raz przyłapie cię na jakimś kłamstwie, to cię strzelę w pysk w ten sposób, że popamiętasz do końca życia.
Niczego nie będę podpisywała.
I wonder what led to this moment of defiance. It's an interesting kind of qualm that I'm having, or an interesting kind of question. Is her refusing to sign the confession what is going to prevent her from getting out? Or is she like doomed to stay in this loop, to be trapped in this prison complex regardless of what decision she makes? There's a question of agency for these prisoners in narratives about prison where, whether intentionally or not, we're led to believe that prisoners have a degree of control over their experience while in a penitentiary. And part of these narratives are, I think at least, part of the process of them, or part of the moral imperative of them, is to show the ways in which that's not the case, that the systems themselves are brutalist and oppressive and remove agency, and it's not up to individuals.
Nie? Za to, że się całowałam z chłopakami w podstawówce. Jak długo tu jesteś? 1,5 roku.
Jesus Christ.
Dzień dobry. Dzień dobry.
How many people are going to fit into this cell? Hey, that's Agnieszka Holland. That's the director of The Secret Garden.
Proszę. Jeszcze chleb. Proszę.
Jak człowiek się dobrze naje, to tu wszystko przetrzyma.
And sleep, I guess.
A co Spychalski, Gomułka? Pozwolili na taki skandal?
Więc podobno Gomułka i Spychalski też siedzą. To była jedna szajka szpiegowska.
So, like, no one is to be trusted.
Na literę D. Na literę T!
Nie wygłupiacie się, wstawajcie, idźcie.
Ja nie należałam do żadnej organizacji.
Bzdury. Musieliście należeć do przedwojennego harcerstwa.
Is that really considered a political movement?
Bo was ciągnęło w stronę reakcji, w stronę podziemia reakcyjnego, w stronę sił prawicy społecznej.
Się wykąpali, bo było gorąco, nie mieliśmy kostiumów, więc wykąpaliśmy się nago, ale było zupełnie ciemno. Potem nagle znaleźliśmy się w ciężarówce.
Kiedyś mówiłaś, że to było na trawie.
I potem...
W samochodzie.
Nie, mówię, że było w samochodzie.
Może jest nie do niczego w łóżku?
Niech pan zostawi mojego męża. Dlaczego ja nie mogę dostać kartki? Dlaczego nie mogę dostać ołówka? Ja chcę
Yeah, it's really horrible the way that she's being subjugated based on regular human impulses. Oh, Jesus.
Czy pani coś podpisała? Każdy podpisuje. No tak, ale ja jestem niewinna.
Everyone's innocent.
Nie ma znaczenia, winna czy niewinna, ale podpisać musi dlatego.
And you kind of see corollaries between the signing, despite being guilty or not guilty.
I oni się zorientują. Władza ludowa nie myli się nigdy.
Similarities with American law enforcement with pumping up stats to show that law enforcement is handling crimes when they're manufacturing crimes to solve.
I że wróg czai się wszędzie, nawet tam, gdzie nikt się nie spodziewa. I musimy być czujni.
It's a whole system where the regime is able to oppress people and suppress dissidents by putting so many people in prison and keeping people fearful, and that it simultaneously bolsters their like public image or reputation to have such a strong like stance against crime.
Rok temu robiłam dokładnie to samo.
Pocisk okazało się był ostry, walał w latrynę tą i jak się gówno rozprysnęło po całym terenie. Oczywiście z Dziunią tak śmierdziałyśmy przez 2 tygodnie, żeśmy w ogóle na scenę nie mogły wejść.
This is a fun anecdote and all. I think she's to a degree displaying kind of like bipolar tendencies, like she's displaying manic and depressive behavior. Yeah, who would have thought being in prison could induce psychological conditions?
Olcha został zdemaskowany przez organa bezpieczeństwa. Zdrada ojczyzny, szpiegostwo na rzecz krajów zachodnich, sabotaż. A jednak
Ale naprawdę niemożliwe.
został aresztowany ze wszystkimi swoimi wspólnikami.
Wspomnieliście o incydencie na poligonie w Ostrudzie?
Kto panu to powiedział?
Przyznajecie się czy nie?
Jeśli podpiszecie zeznanie, że działaliście z polecenia Olchy, może ocalić ci głowę.
Przecież pan sam wie, że to nieprawda.
Pravda.
No jak, prawda czy nieprawda? No,
Nie piszę.
rozpisz.
Nie piszę.
Tłumaczaj, tu, pisz.
The metaphor of the messy desk and whatever, the kind of disarray of the government officials.
Zalała. Pisz.
Nie piszę. Stalówka się tu...
I don't love it, but it's effective in communicating.
Spierdolona pisz! Strażnik! Strażnik! No właśnie!
Nie no, no proszę cię, puść mnie, no boli mnie, no...
Oh, Jesus Christ. I like the little detail of her nail polish that's just slowly been crumbling away.
Trzeba się myć, rozumiesz? Trzeba się myć i czesać, żeby wiesz, żeby nie być jak zwierzę. Słyszałeś to?
This is an interesting kind of refutation of these this advice that's been dispersed in terms of surviving this situation. In a regular human situation, you'd say, like, you know, you have to groom yourself, you have to eat to kind of maintain your sanity, and to a degree that's true, but within this kind of oppressive prison system, any sort of advice that could be given doesn't really match the magnitude of the situation.
Jeśli będziecie z nami współpracować, wykażecie minimum dobrej woli. Będziecie znacznie łagodniej traktowani. Dlatego majorze przesłuchiwana odmawia zeznań.
Najlepiej przyłożyć nóż albo maletę, naprawdę to pomaga.
Prowadzić.
Oh no, they're gonna kill her cellmate or torture her cellmate.
Ja Mirosława Szajnert.
To. Nie głośniej.
Razem z Antoniną Dziwisz, kochanką majora przekazał Antoninie Dziwisz polecenie zbierania
Even worse, they
informacji
had her betray her.
Mira, dlaczego to zrobiłeś? Zmusili cię? Musiałam.
Strażnik do łaźni. Co ty tu pierdolisz? Co musiałaś? Podpisałaś to własną ręką. Nie tą! Tą!
This like repeated theme of the signatures, even under all of this duress, it's just so maniacal. And it's so like pointless, needing the signature as like this one confirming aspect. But given under all of this manipulation, that still somehow this signature is seen as authentic.
Zasrana. Myślisz, że mnie wyprowadzisz z równowagi? Jeśli natychmiast nie podpiszesz, to cię raz strzelę jak wściekłego psa. 3, 4.
Ubierzcie się.
It's an interesting little detail that they're kind of like put off or like disturbed by her sexuality.
Wstrętni prowokatorzy, gnoje. Sami nie wierzycie w te wszystkie bzdury. Sadysta! Po SS-man, gestapo! Bezczelna, głupia dziwko! Co ty wiesz o gestapo?
It's a harried history of this region. Just, oh my god.
Jestem zmęczona.
Just evil on top of evil on top of evil. People believing that they're on the right side of history, committing the worst atrocities. The same could be said of America as well. Not the personalized history of the Nazis in concentration camps, but atrocities committed in justification for battling some sort of greater evil. Yeah, you can definitely see the sexual aspect of this torture. What is this process psychologically doing for the interrogators? Although it's an interesting question, especially between the two interrogators, whether or not they are at the root sadists or they get some sort of sexual satisfaction, whether this is pleasurable for them, whether this is dispassionate. Oh, it's her husband. Konstantini.
Boję się. To sen. Nie! Ja nie chcę się obudzić, nie!
Oh, Jesus. If they ever get out, they're going to experience some severe PTSD.
Powiem majorowi, że pozwoliłeś mi spać.
Wyznaczy na moje miejsce kogoś, kto nie pozwoli.
Dlaczego pan to zrobił?
That comment about the Nazis really struck him to the core, I suppose.
Chciałbym, żeby się pani przyznała z pewnym przekonaniem do winy.
A ty jakiej winy? Pan wierzy w to wszystko?
The like hyper-vigilant part of my mind is like worrying. It doesn't seem like this would be the case given the like psychological progression of these characters and their interactions, but I do worry that now they've changed tack to a good cop, bad cop kind of approach, and all of this is a deception.
Jest pani jeszcze bardzo naiwna. Przecież nie ma bezwzględnej uczciwości. W obozie to, co dla jednego było uczciwe, dla innego było kompletnym draństwem. Zresztą w ogóle ludzie postępują znacznie gorzej, niż się pani wydaje.
It's daunting to even kind of conceive that him talking about Auschwitz, about the concentration camps, that somewhere deep inside of him is a memory of an experience that's worse than what he's inflicting currently. Maybe it isn't. Maybe this is a kind of bias that's been attributed, that's been created from this memory, and it's a way to justify whatever actions he takes within this prison. But it's harrowing to think that there may be something worse.
I wie pan, co myślę? Że w życiu na przekór wszystkiemu trzeba robić głupstwa i mieć kaprysy. Chyba właściwie tylko w to jedno wierzę. Chciałabym wrócić do celi.
Imię, nazwisko, data urodzenia, imię ojca.
To jest twoja ostatnia szansa.
Nie. Ty! No powiedz, żeby do mnie strzelił, ja już dłużej tego nie wytrzymam, no zrób to! Proszę cię!
All of this manipulation. And this failed state. It's like theater. It's like what she was doing at the beginning of this. But that this state has to appear more powerful than it is, and it enacts all of this theater. The theatrics of brutality, the theatrics of oppression and power.
Tonia, jak się czujesz?
Tonia, ale pokazał mi twoje zeznanie. Z twoim własnoręcznym podpisem. Tonia, jak mogłaś? Byłaś kochanką Olchy.
Again, her sexuality is weaponized against her. He has no idea what she's been through, how committed she's been behind bars to him.
Nienawidzę cię, nie chcę cię widzieć w ogóle. I właściwie tylko w tym celu tutaj przyszedłem, żeby ci to powiedzieć.
And he can't trust his eyes. He can't see what's right in front of him. That she's been, whatever she's said or written has been made under duress. This kind of dehumanizing effect of stigmatized individuals. If you put a person in a prison, suddenly they're viewed in a completely different light, even if they're haggard, even if they're starving, even if they're bleeding and tortured and bruised. Because they're put in that prison, your mind, your bias will assume that somehow they have responsibility or they have agency over that situation. It's a cruel kind of naivety we have about the world, that those who experience hardship must have been somehow at fault. She's trying to increase blood flow so that if she tries to kill herself, it'll be faster. Oh my god, she's gonna bite through into her vein. That's the only thing that she's been given at this point. This is the only way she can kill herself. Oh, Jesus. That's terrible. That really is terrible. Agnieszka. And the final, the last stage, she's been transported to the hospital that she was hearing the screams from the beginning. There's a kind of circularity to this narrative that, you know, it feels like hell. It feels like you're constantly circling around in an endless loop of torture. So that she can kill herself again. Yeah.
Żeby się znów żyły otworzyć.
You know, soldiers just joshing around, having fun. I think in terms of the banality of evil aspect of it, it is kind of important, or it is instructive to remember that a lot of these soldiers will be like youths, like people in their young adulthood, in their 20s and stuff, people enjoying their budding sexuality, their new experiences of life, their new experiences with power, with control. And part of this like dehumanizing effect is it helps them kind of like not really understand the consequences of their actions. So when you're young and you're impressionable, you could help kind of maintain or guard this kind of prison. And if you're just told that these people that are contained are dissidents, are inhuman, are against the state, are somehow at fault, your mind won't think too critically about whether or not what you're doing is good or bad. If you're on the side of the state, if you're on the side of some larger authority, then that condones, that justifies any action. Don't like that there's a bed there.
Wszystkiego dobrego.
I really truly do hope that I've gotten the video out for the night porter at this point, so that you may you may infer my opinion on this interaction. I love that if you watch this scene, like, out of context or whatever, you'd assume that Antonina has some sort of agency, that she's a willing participant to the same degree as this officer. But if you watch the whole of the movie, I think you'll have the understanding that she in no way has control or agency in this situation. And while it may be, like, in some ways a relief, in some ways less of a torture than the rest of her material conditions, she's still been put in this situation under duress. And this is like the dream, the fantasy of of young fascists, to put women in these situations where these women who would never otherwise interact with them, who would never see them, would feel compelled under whatever circumstances to suddenly recognize them or appreciate them, see them as their saviors.
Przecież wiesz, że nie mogę być z tobą sam. No mów, o co ci chodzi? Potrzebujesz czegoś?
Jestem w ciąży. Nie denerwuj się. Powiem, że mnie zgwałcili w szpitalu, kiedy byłam nieprzytomna. Nie denerwuj się, nie powiedziałam nic o Olsze, nie powiem mi o tobie.
Trochę dawno został strzelany.
That's terrible. Oh my god, what is the point of all of this?
Nie dotykaj mnie!
Towarzysz porucznik mnie wzywał?
These incels.
Wyprowadzić.
I'm glad that the movie was honest about the power dynamic in this, even if their feelings to a certain degree are realistic, or not realistic, are authentic. Still, the reality of the situation is the power, the state of control that's forced Antonina's compliance under duress. Stalin's dead.
Stali numer!
Co się stało?
Being, oh my god. Forced to give birth in prison to your interrogator's child. Oh my god. This is happening in our American prisons right now. It's not the regime, it's not the ideology, it's not the whatever particular state, it is the modes of power.
Brudne ręczniki, zmienić.
Everybody in that cell knows what's happening.
Kalinowska.
Nazwisko.
And because one officer wanted to see his child, he's decided to punish all the rest of these women. Because he needed the guys, the justifying the justifying action of taking all of their children. Mothers are deemed unfit or unwell, unable to care for their own children.
Wyprowadzić.
Another movie we could chalk up on the channel with a scene in an orphanage. She's not going to be able to identify her child, like in the other movie that has a scene in an orphanage.
Nie mogę poznać.
No córeczko, kochana, no proszę cię, nie płacz. To naprawdę jest twoja mama, uspokój się, proszę cię. Nie płacz, nie będzie krzywka.
Will it be Kansani, the man who abandoned her at her time of most need? And she has to go back. She has to somehow be the same person that she was when she was taken away. It's a lot to bear. It's a lot to bear. If you want to see an interesting companion piece to this, there was a documentary that was released this year called Free Chosoli, and it's about an experience that happened here in the US with a Korean immigrant who was wrongfully charged with a murder, and the police, working with like the state prosecution, kind of like expedited his trial and his sentencing, probably in part because they didn't want to have an unsolved murder case. And so this was a processing of convenience. This was a charge of convenience, and he ended up enduring, I think, 17 years in the prison system in America. And after eventually being released, basically couldn't find a foothold again, wasn't able to reintegrate back into society, and was obviously completely changed after 17 years in the prison complex, despite despite becoming a figurehead, despite having advocacy groups and individuals kind of championing his cause and eventually getting his sentencing overturned, and being seen as like a hero to the public and to the Asian American public. Despite all of that, and that's massive support system and national coverage, Chosuli was unable to reclaim those 17 years. Yeah. This is a harrowing watch. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it for everybody, but it is certainly instructive as to the dehumanizing process that people undergo when put into the prison industrial complex. In some ways, I think it's a vital watch for understanding these systems of power and abuse, and also like how stigmatized individuals, how people who are put on the brunt end of our civilization, whether they be prisoners, whether they be the homeless, whether they be the mentally unfit, that is under very, very rare circumstances, especially in extremely powerful nations. It's extremely rare that they've wound up there on their own accord, based on their own actions, based on their own lack of responsibility. This woman was wrongfully imprisoned for 6-7 years, beaten, tortured, humiliated, impregnated, raped, in order to sign papers that would accuse a man they already killed years ago. There is no point to this. The point is just to keep feeding people to the system, to dehumanize them, to devalue them, and to maintain control and the theatrics of power for the state. It's disgusting. Yeah, that's Interrogation. It's available to watch on Blu-ray and DVD from Second Run, if you're interested. Let me see if it's available to watch on YouTube. If it is, I'll include a link in the description or in the comments. Yeah, you can watch this on YouTube. In the meantime, don't forget to click the like button and subscribe for more old, obscure, and art house films. I know the Polish movies are hard. I think that's part of why they're important to watch. And until next time, keep watching good movies.